Hello, everyone. My name is Stephanie Boozer. I'm with CUGC HQ, and I am very happy to welcome you to today's CUGC Connect webinar with ControlUp. Going to be talking about getting your end users back to work, very important right now. But before I turn things over to our friends, I want to go over a couple of housekeeping details. First of all, I want to let you know that we are recording today's presentation and you will receive a link to the recording via email tomorrow. That email is going to come directly from GoToWebinar, so be on the lookout for that. Also, please submit your questions at any time in the question box over as part of the GoToWebinar control panel. You can pop it out, type your questions in there anytime. We'll take some during the presentation and some afterwards, so just fire away as you have them. And finally, I will be giving you a link towards the end to a CUGC survey just to get your opinion on today's webinar and your thoughts and feedback on everything that you saw today and what you might like to see in the future. It's quick and anonymous. It doesn't take too long. All right, so we have with us today James Rankin. I think, James, this is your third week in a row being on a webinar with me. I think we're going to have to start a club. James is the CTP and he is on the UK CUGC steering committee. So he's going to be watching all of those questions that you type in. James, want to say hello to everyone?
Hello everyone, I hope you're all keeping well and not going completely stir crazy like most of my household are. And anybody who's ever seen any of my presentations knows that I'm always telling people that you need to monitor your environments to make sure you understand what's going on and how you can improve the user experience and push back on users who are having a good user experience but trying to claim that it's bad and things like that. So I always enjoy sitting in on things where we talk about monitoring and ControlUp. I've worked with quite a lot, and you know, it's a good product, and I would be very interested to see what cool stuff we can do with it that I didn't know about already. So I'm looking forward to it too.
Thanks, James. All right, so let's get to it. We have with us Trentent Tye. He is a technical specialist at ControlUp, and he's also a Citrix CTP. And I'm going to hand things straight over to you now, just so you can get us started. Let's see, the screen is coming your way. There you go.
Great, thank you. Okay, well, thank everyone for coming and joining this webinar and taking the time out of, I'm sure, your extremely busy day to learn about how we can try to help getting your users back to work. You know, obviously we're in a very interesting time right now where this seems to be the situation that a lot of us are in. I know me personally, I've got a little 4-year-old daughter who is very energetic and has interjected on several of my calls. So I imagine this is probably the situation that a lot of us are in today. And so we're going to try to see how we can leverage ControlUp to actually help you and make your work life easier and help get your users back to work. So just a little bit of housekeeping. I'm going to talk about ControlUp as the company, who we are, and kind of what we do. So ControlUp, we're a venture-backed organization. We have self-sustained business growth. We've been growing year over year over year, along with you know, all the metrics that make us a stable company. We've got now 1,000+ customers, and obviously we're VMware, Citrix, Nutanix ready. We're a Microsoft WVD partner, so we have you know, we're around in the industry. We have all of the credentials to prove it. So we obviously work with all the major vendors. With Microsoft, we have full support of their desktop operating system, their server operating system. I mentioned WVD, so Windows for Virtual Desktops. We're a WVD partner. We can support and monitor and help optimize that operating system. You know, VMware, we do Horizon integration now. This just came out in last August, and we released 8.1, I think, in January, which came with the full integration. And then we also support the ESXi environment. NVIDIA, we support NVIDIA graphics cards and NVIDIA grid metrics that we can pull into your session so you can actually measure and monitor your graphics performance there. Citrix, obviously, we support all of the Citrix ecosystem, you know, from the Zen app and virtual apps and virtual desktops, all the way to the Citrix hypervisor and Citrix NetScaler products as well. And Nutanix, we support the Acropolis hypervisor. So your infrastructure is covered with ControlUp. So this is our architecture, and it's a bit of a complex diagram that I don't want to dwell too much on. Essentially, all that you see here means that we have a portable app that you can download directly off of our website, double click it, and start monitoring your environment. And this architecture essentially makes that happen. So this complexity gets simplified very easily once you start using us. So let's talk about what we do. So ControlUp is a real-time product. And what that means is that we monitor metrics within the Windows servers every 3 seconds. For hypervisors, we're limited to the performance of the hypervisor providing us metrics, which is about every 20 seconds. So we're as real-time as you can get. And why that's important is if you're experiencing fluctuations in your environment, if you're watching someone actually log on to the system, actually being able to see a process, spike up to 100% CPU utilization for, that 15, 20 seconds that might be impacting your logon and then going away, knowing what that process was is important. That's important information. If you're sampling, every 30 seconds or every minute or every 5 minutes, you're going to miss that information entirely. You're just going to be blind to it. So being real time is a very big advantage for us. And we think that it adds a lot of value to our product. We also do remediation. So with our ControlUp product, we can actually execute. So we don't just monitor, we actually manage. So you have the ability to actually click on an object within our interface and we can actually do something with that. So it could be logging off a user, it could be rebooting a VM, could be terminating a process, or even setting a host to maintenance mode. We offer a lot of different ability to manage and remediate your environment through the ControlUp console, through this one single pane of glass. So we also do benchmarking. So if you're using our ControlUp product, we're collecting the metadata within your environment, so all essentially the performance metrics, and we're uploading them into ControlUp Insights, where we can actually create a community benchmark, and you can actually see how your environment is faring versus everyone else in the community. ControlUp does quick analysis, so it's a product where we've spent a lot of time to try to help you troubleshoot faster, help you get to the root cause faster. And one of the ways we do that is we have this feature called stress, where we can actually assign, once you've crossed a particular threshold, that a color changes within one of the properties of one of the objects. So for instance, if your login time goes above 25 seconds, we can change that to be yellow. Once it goes above 30 seconds, we change it to be red. So this way you can actually sort, view, and very quickly identify who's having problems. And if you've seen screenshots of our products, it sometimes looks like a Christmas tree. And believe it or not, this is actually helpful information as opposed to everything being green or everything being red. All right, and here we do the expert community. So obviously you've heard James kind of give us a little intro there at the beginning. We engage with so many members of the community, whether we have them, doing some consultant work for us, or actually writing scripts or SPAs, or they're submitting SPAs, which is script actions you can execute within the console. We're constantly engaging within the community to try to see how we can help solve the problems the community is encountering and how we can help make your lives easier. So automation is big. Automation is really, really big, and it's getting bigger and bigger. Obviously, as you and your IT staff is probably experiencing today, there's a lot of manual work, standing up virtual machines, getting them configured, getting users assigned to them, making sure that they're performant, making sure that if users are running into a problem, that it gets solved quickly. What automation can bring to that is it can reduce the amount of effort you have in manually trying to solve these problems, manually trying to execute all these actions. So with automation, we can do things like provide more context to a problem. We can actually remediate the problem automatically if needed, or we can actually do some performance optimization as well if we detect that users are in a certain state, and we'll actually get into some demos of that as well. And then capacity planning. Again, the world we're in today, I've been talking with customers. I've been trying to help some customers with some of the problems that they're having, and they're talking about onboarding 10,000 customers or 10,000 users a week or 5,000 users a week, and they don't have hardware for it. Excuse me. They don't they're onboarding these users onto their existing infrastructure because the hardware that they purchased is now 10 weeks out. It's 12 weeks out. You can't purchase something and stand it up today. That's just not feasible in not even today's environment. It wasn't even feasible 3 months ago. So this is the world today. In ControlUp, we can actually help provide you some guidance on your capacity planning and monitoring the experience of your virtual machines and your users themselves. So this is essentially what we're about today, is the EUC operations challenges that we're facing. And a lot of it is around, COVID-19 or / the coronavirus. Excuse me. I'm not sick, I promise. That was just a frog in my throat. But that's the challenges we're facing today. So IT right now, everywhere it seems they're in full, I wouldn't call it panic mode, but it's, feet to the ground, boots to the ground, start running, start standing stuff up, start getting people operational. And that's the theme of this webinar today. Let's get our users back to work, and let's try to get them back to work in the best way we can. So I'm going to get into some demos. The first demo we're going to do is the real-time troubleshooting. So we'll get into the performance monitoring. So how ControlUp, we can actually see the performance of our objects that we are monitoring, and then how we can actually optimize and improve the performance of it. And then we'll get into the ControlUp automation engine. All right, so this is the ControlUp platform, or the ControlUp product today. And what we're looking at here is we're looking at the hypervisors view. So you can see on the left here, we've got all of our hypervisors that we support. So Zen Server, vCenter, Nutanix, Hyper-V, all the major players essentially. And in the middle pane here, we actually have what's called our grid display. And we're looking at all of the objects that we're monitoring. We're looking at, our VMware objects, or Hyper-V, like I said before, and then all the different properties and columns that are being populated with the information we're pulling from these objects. So we can see that we're color coding this. So we can see the stress level is high. We can see some orange or / yellow, and we can see some red. So these are highlighting that quick analysis. Immediately we can see we've got 2 areas of interest. We've got one that's a stress level high that we can focus on right away. In this particular one, this AHV3, this is actually standard fare for him. He runs at 98% CPU utilization, so I should probably address the stress value so it's not red, but we can ignore him for now. However, this particular one, this data store read-write IOPS issue of it being around 40,000 is of concern. This is not normal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this little hamburger icon here, and it's going to bring up our virtual expert. And what I can do here is that the virtual expert will actually guide our troubleshooting journey. So it's suggesting that we can drill down into the virtual machine, into the virtual machine of the host, or it's saying, hey, we can go to the sessions view and look at all the sessions that it thinks is causing this problem, or we can go to the process view and look at all the processes that it thinks might be causing this problem. So we're going to start with the machines view. And this drills us into the hypervisor. And so now what it's done is it's telling us what we're investigating. So it's telling us that we're looking at a data store read-write IOPS of about 38,000. It's highlighted the column of interest, and then it's taken the virtual machines and it's, again, highlighted the column and then sorted it. So this is part of that quick analysis. And again, we can see red is bad, green is good. Red is very quick to identify that this particular virtual machine looks like he's the one causing our issue. So what we can do at this point is, if I right click on this object, we can actually execute an action. And so we can actually manage this object and try to solve this problem if we wanted to. So for instance, I can RDP to the machine. I can manage the registry or services. I can do maybe a group policy action, or maybe reboot it, shut it down, something like that, so on and so forth. And then script actions, which we'll get into in a little bit, where we can actually customize and extend ControlUp. But since I don't know what the root cause of this is yet, I'm going to click this hamburger icon again, and now I'm going to drill into the sessions view. And so now we're in an agent-based view. We're actually drilling into the virtual machine itself, and now we're pulling all of the user sessions that happen to be on it. So what we can see here is we've got this one user, and again, ControlUp has sorted it by the column of interest that it thinks is causing the problem. It's highlighted it red because it's past some stress levels, stress threshold that we've configured. And again, we can immediately see that, hey, this guy's probably causing an issue out of all the users on this box. So what I can do is, again, I can right click on him, and now we get a different contextual menu that's relevant for the sessions. for the sessions objects. So now what we can do is we can get a session screenshot to see what this user's doing. We can kill his group policy, reapply his group policy. We can start a process in this session, and we can import some registry keys. We can log him off. We can disconnect him. We can send him a message. We can start a chat with this user, asking him, "Hey man, what are you doing? What's IO meter? What is all of this?" And just to bring to your attention here, for those of you who may have used ControlUp in the past, we've got 3 new columns that we're introducing with 8.1.5, and 8.1.5 is in beta starting today, I believe, where we will actually monitor the active application and the title, and if it's a browser, we'll actually tell you what the root URL is from here. So that's a pretty exciting feature. But let's continue our troubleshooting journey. So I don't know what this user's doing. I want to get to the root cause of it. So I'm going to click on the processes now, and this is going to navigate us down into the processes view, where we can see that there's a process called dynamo.exe. It's generating a lot of CPU utilization and a lot of IOPS. So odds are this is probably the root cause of our problem. We went from the hosts view down to the machine, down to the sessions, down to the processes view. So we were able to look at a problem that was being observed at the host level, and we were able to identify the individual process causing it all the way down within the processes view here. And again, this isn't just monitoring, we can manage this. So if I right click on this object, I can now do an action on it. So I can end the process or kill the process. So end terminates the process gracefully if it will. Kill the process obviously just tries to kill it without ending gracefully. And then we can do things like even set processor affinity, where we can lock it to maybe 1 CPU, or set process priority, where maybe we want to de-elevate this process. So if we run into a situation where like someone's running a long report, and it's generating like a whole bunch of PDF pages and it's taking forever, then you can actually adjust the process priority so that way that user who's running that report generator on your Citrix server, it's not actually impacting your other users, or it's impacting it as minimally as possible. And then again, we can also even throttle the CPU. So if we click on this, we can actually tell it to adjust the CPU to a certain percentage point. So we can set a percentage target of like 3%. We don't want it to exceed that many CPU cycles. But again, I know it's the process here, but I still don't quite know what is actually happening. So I'm going to get a session screenshot here. And you can see the session screenshot actually had 3 options: without notifying the user, with notification, or with user approval. And all of those is configurable with the security policy. So when you choose the security policy, you're actually able to gray out those menus. Okay. And so what we can do once we've got that, we can chat with the user, we can ask him what he's doing, and then he can terminate this process. So this example actually came up because we had a real situation where we worked with a customer where someone was testing their storage and they'd actually accidentally left IO meter running. You can actually have IO meter, I think by default it runs infinitely. So this was an interesting scenario, and we've replicated it in our lab to demo this. So what I want to get to now is how we can actually monitor and optimize your end user experience, especially for, if you're on WVD or if you're on a VDI environment, which we're spitting out desktops now like crazy. If you're on Windows 10, 18, or 9 Plus, there's a new metric, or on Server 2019, called user experience delay, or user input delay. And so I'm going to focus on this, and let's just navigate to my session that I have out. All right, and it should be this guy. So we're looking at this guy. I'm going to drill into him. And what we're looking at is, so obviously I've been idle for some time, so ControlUp has automatically deprioritized my processes, because if I'm in idle session, I don't need to be consuming a whole lot of CPU from other users. But I'm actually just going to set this up. So I'm just going to set the process priority to normal. And let's hop back on him. And so what I have here that you see on the right is I've got an Adobe Reader file, and it's actually got a 3D model on here. This virtual machine that I'm using doesn't have 3D graphics. So that means all of this 3D computation is being done on the CPU. And when it's being done on the CPU, that means that the frame rate suffers. That means that it's a bit slower, and the user input delay will actually reflect that. And now, because it's all being done on the CPU, ControlUp will pick up that the user input delay is of a high value, and it will adjust the process priority for me automatically. So it should set it to above normal. Bang, it just did. And so this is a way that if you're running like a program like Epic, and if you've got user input delay monitoring it, you can actually see, okay, is the user input delay of the process or of the session or even of the machines themselves, is it starting to creep up? As I start adding users to the box, what is the average or max user input delay that I'm experiencing across these servers? And now you'll be able to actually benchmark what is it at 10 users, 20 users, 30 users, and so on and so forth. And the user input delay, how it works is it's actually a metric that calculates every time the UI updates, and it returns the UI back to you. So when I click on this file menu here, when it draws the file menu, it actually measures from when I clicked to when it completed drawing. And so as I hover over this menu and my selection changes, the user input delay there is actually measured based on that field changing its highlight. So I think it's a very powerful feature. It runs on the process side, runs on the server side. So you will know how your infrastructure is running, as opposed to something like the ICA-RTT, which takes network into consideration, which obviously we all have extremely static network latencies, right? Just kidding. But user input delay, I think, is very powerful that way. So how does this work? So what we have is we have a trigger system, and we've got our script actions. And ControlUp has taken these two features of this product, and we've combined them together. So if we look at the triggers for this particular automation that we want to do, what I've got is I've got this trigger right here, AAP CPU increased priority user input delay, and you can name it whatever you want. So obviously, how the first thing you want to set is the record type. I've set the record to be process because I wanted this to execute against a process. I set my conditions. So I'm looking for the user input delay to be greater than or equal to 15 milliseconds. And since we don't want user input delay to be executed across all processes, we're focusing it just if the process name is Acrobat32, which is the Adobe Reader program. So you can set your scope. This scope actually equals the folder structure here on your left. When you choose the root, like I did with Acme, then it's actually applying across the entire organization. But you can actually choose one of your subfolders within, and it'll only apply to that and those objects within. And then here I've got my action. So set process priority to above normal. So let's take a look at what that action looks like. So if I go into my script actions, I'm going to go to my organizational scripts here, and let me search for it. There we are. I'm going to modify it. And so this is the script. So you'll see the level of power that you have versus the simplicity of the scripts that you can produce and actually create this type of automation. So for instance, in the settings, I'm targeting the processes. Again, my execution context is the target machine. This means when this script executes, it's going to run under the local system account. So you can see that security context listed there. And this is the script. So it's 2 lines right now. You could break it down to 1. I just had it as 2 just so it's easier to show the process priority hash. But you can see I'm just focusing on the number 1 being above normal. And the actual script that's executing is it's getting the process ID, it's getting 1 argument, so arg0, and it's setting the priority class to be whatever we'd specified in the hash, which is above normal. So how does it get this value? So if we look at the arguments of a script action, we can actually pass any column that we have in here within the ControlUp console as an argument, and you can see that it does the replacement automatically. So in this particular case, we're passing the PID, the process ID. So any process ID that this script is run against, it'll actually pull that in and set that process priority to be above normal. Since we've got the trigger doing the filtering down for us, all that complex if-then logic that you might have is being done by the trigger. And so now your script can actually be quite simple. And so this is how ControlUp can actually help optimize your user experience, help, if you got those critical VIP processes that require those, good functionality, good performance, you can actually use ControlUp to actually automate them when you detect that maybe they're starting to struggle, and make sure that your users are able to be as productive as possible by optimizing your resources within your virtual machines. So let's get to another automation optimization technique here. So another thing that we can do, because we have all of these columns, we have all of this stuff that we monitor, we can actually track whether users are actually being productive, or aka are they idle, or are they in a disconnected state. If they're in a disconnected state, odds are they're not actually performing any work. They've disconnected from their Citrix session. Those sessions are sitting there consuming memory, they're consuming CPU, but that's all they're doing. They're not actually like doing real work. Or if they're idle, it could be the same thing. If they walked away for lunch, they're consuming resources that someone else could be using during that time period. So let's look at an example of this. So I'm going to focus on here. I'm going to go to a machine, which I think I already have an existing session. Yes. All right, so I'm going to look for my session here, and here I am. And just tweak my column presets so we can take a look at the relevant information. And so what we're looking at here is we're looking at my user here. I've been idle for 2 hours, so all my priorities are set to below normal. We can see the amount of memory I'm consuming is about 182 megabytes, so it's already been trimmed. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to make myself active, and I can make myself active just by clicking within this window, and ControlUp is going to pick up that my session state is now changed to active, and it's going to adjust the process priority here back to normal. So as users are, if they're in a disconnected state, we don't just want to deprioritize them, we also want to bring them back. And so boom, the priority just changed back to normal. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to simulate that disconnection now. So if I right click on them, go here and disconnect this user, ControlUp will pick up that the session state will have changed to disconnected, and now it's going to do the reverse. So you can see the memory here, it's 191 megabytes. You can see the memory work instead of the processes themselves. We'll see the priorities get deprioritized to below normal. The memory working set will get trimmed, so it'll reduce the amount of consumed memory of this session that's now in a disconnected state. So boom, process priority was just dropped to below normal. And within a second, boom, we can now see that we freed 170 megabytes worth of memory for users who might be being productive on that same box. So if you can imagine.
I was just going to say, Trent, and we actually had a question about memory management, such as similar what you do with CPU throttling. So I think this is kind of what you're demonstrating right now. So hopefully that answers that.
Sorry, I missed that.
I'm saying I had a question from someone asking if you can do memory management in the same way that you can do CPU throttling. I didn't think you could do it. I mean, you can't actually limit how much memory a process will use, can you? Well, not as far as I know, but you can trim it in this way, yeah?
So actually you can.
There you go.
The great Guy Leach is the guy who actually wrote our memory trimming script, and yeah, he's a pretty good guy. And one of the things he actually has on there is you can actually set a maximum working set limit. And so once that process starts to exceed that limit, it automatically gets trimmed. And how the Windows memory management works is that every page it has is tagged with some metadata, like how often it's accessed, when it was created, or when it was first brought into life, so to speak. And it uses some kind of formula that it says, okay, if we need to trim memory down to this amount, all of these pages that are outside of this threshold, they get purged. So yes, we do have the ability to do that. Whether you want to do it in your environment, I mean, I would suggest maybe you really want to know what you're doing and make sure you read up on it to make sure it's good. But like, I imagine this question is probably coming because of Google Chrome. Chrome can just grow for forever for memory, so this would be probably a good way to manage it. Yeah. So yeah, it's an interesting idea. I haven't actually used it in a state where users are actually being active while paging or trimming is going on, but for sure it's something that in your environment you'll definitely want to set up an environment and test it and make sure that it's working for you.
Is that script available just by going into the console and downloading the script-based actions? Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. So we can actually just take a quick peek at both the triggers that we did for this and the scripts themselves. So this is the trim process working set script, and it's just a PowerShell script. Guy has, as he's written it, as he submitted it to us, we've actually put it on our script library, so it's free for everybody. You can actually go download it, and then all you need to do is populate the appropriate parameters if you want to try it in your environment without ControlUp. So this is what it looks like. We're targeting the session in this particular instance and the execution context target machine under local system. And these are the different parameters. So you can see he actually has a parameter here, trim 2 megabytes. So if you set this to 0, it tries its best to trim as much memory as possible, which is what we default to. So in our particular instance here for this SPA, if you don't want to trim memory down to as low as possible, you can actually adjust this value to be something like 10 megabytes or 100 megabytes if you don't want to go below that level of threshold. Because any memory that is purged out, if the process itself requests it, it's going to need to page it back in, which is a performance impact. But again, if the session's in a disconnected state, that user's not actually doing work, so those processes won't be actually doing that too often. And then as well, we can also exclude processes. So you can see you can change it by using the /delimiter to add additional processes on here that you want to not be trimmed or to not have the CPU optimization as well. And so let's just do a quick look on the triggers here for this particular action. So these are community triggers that we have. They're built in when you download ControlUp and you install it. They're actually right here. Oops, I went down a little too far. And all you need to do to activate them is you just check the boxes. So these are them here, AHS or AAS, session state active, active to idle, disconnected, and idle to active. So as soon as you check all the boxes here, ControlUp will ask you if you want to download the scripts. You accept the license agreement for it. The scripts get downloaded, and then you can go in here and actually edit and change some of the properties of the script. So for instance, you can change the scope if you don't want to target your entire environment. You maybe want to target like a test folder or something like that. And then again, here you can see we've got this script, adjust process party based on session state. So I wrote a script that has some logic in it, so that way I didn't have to have multiple scripts. So this one will actually pass in things like session state, and it'll actually be able to determine whether you're in active, idle, all on its own, and then adjust the process party automatically. And then same with active to idle. We can see that this trigger is an advanced trigger. We're actually targeting state equals active, which means the screen's being remoted, but the idle time is greater than or equal to 15 minutes. And so once the idle time exceeds that threshold, then we're going to run these scripts to deprioritize it. So if you wanted to modify this, you just go in the filter editor here, click on this, and if you want 30 minutes, you type 30 minutes, hit OK, and away you go. So same thing, and now here's the two scripts that it runs. So now you can kind of see, even within the trigger itself, we can actually execute multiple actions. It doesn't just have to be one. We can execute as many scripts as you want to do whatever action or whatever activity you want to do that meets that trigger's thresholds. And then so the disconnected and idle to active is the same, just in reverse.
Awesome. I've learned something already.
Yeah, this is great. This is awesome technology. I love this stuff. All right, so let's move on to another one. So augmented troubleshooting. So one of the big challenges that we have, and I'm sure we're getting them more and more today as people are calling in with help desk calls. I mean, you guys know your end users, right? They call in and they tell you it's slow. That's all the information you get. So now you need to either do a callback, you need to find if you can get some kind of tertiary information, like, okay, they were on this server at this time. You might be able to go to your historical monitoring tool and try to find like some piece of information that might be a smoking gun before you have to reach out to the user. And can they replicate it? No. Was it a transient issue? Like, it's those kind of things are so frustrating to deal with. So what we can do with ControlUp is, if we can detect certain states, we can actually, instead of doing a remediation action, we can record the information, or we can run a script to do more and record more information, or start some kind of troubleshooting process. So I'm going to give some examples of the kind of information that you can get, and even the real-time nature of it, so that way you can get alerted to actually start troubleshooting more quickly. So one of our hires at ControlUp, his name is Joel Stalker, I think, Joel in the Cloud. He created a script action for us that we published recently called Slack notifications. And what it allows you to do is you can just modify this SPA with your webhook, and then you tie it into a trigger, and then it'll actually notify you on Slack when something has exceeded that threshold. So for instance, let's take a look at it. And then as well, I've got ServiceNow, or he's actually integrated ServiceNow into it as well. So I'm going to go into my environment here, and we've got this set up to notify us when a slow logon is detected. So I'm going to look for a machine to log on to here, and let's go into this guy. And so if you follow me on Twitter, I'm right now investigating if there's a way to optimize Apex packages, because customers I'm working with, it just throttles your Windows 10 desktop logon time. So I'm trying to find a solution here. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to log on to this machine, and we're going to go through the logon process. We're going to get to I think the please wait for Windows, or here we are, preparing Windows. So this is actually it loading all the Apex packages. This is it processing file type associations. This is it doing all the registry staging and file staging to make sure that all of those Apex packages that happens to be built into Windows is ready for your user to use. And the frustrating thing is, it is literally blocking my ability to be productive. I have to wait for this stage to be done. And what's wild is if you look at the Windows 10 desktop versus the server desktop, servers don't go through this. So I'm doing a little bit of investigation right now to find out why that is, and hopefully I can come up with some kind of solution. But what we can look at in the meantime is, so I've logged on to this machine. We're going to look at my session. My logon duration is 44 seconds. And if I switch back over here, and if I look at my Slack, we can see that Barry just connected in. He just experienced an excessive logon time, and within a couple seconds or here, we'll actually get another pop-up of Slack messaging me and letting me know that, hey, within our incidents, within our organization, we're experiencing some kind of issue. So obviously, this is probably something where you want to focus more on, specific VIP type stuff, or if you're encountering, common problems and you want to be alerted immediately so you can start jumping on it and start investigating what's happening, you can do that. So Slack will eventually get to me and tell me what's going on. And what we can do in the meantime, if we wanted to actually look, oh, there it goes. User Trent is experiencing excessive logon times. Thank you, Slack. Thank you, ControlUp. Tells me that I created a ServiceNow ticket, tells me what the ticket number is. It actually gives me a link that I can actually just click, and then boom, I connect into my ServiceNow and look at this contextual information. It's not my login was slow. Now I can see where it was slow, why it was slow. It was slow at the shell stage. Okay, shell is to be expected based on what I just kind of explained. And we can see the login time was 43 seconds. So now we can close this ticket. We can reach back out to the user and be like, okay, we've got profile management on. It should be storing all that Apex stuff in your profile, so you shouldn't have this for your next logon. But at least now we've got some real contextual information to actually help us do better within our environments themselves. So kudos, Joel, much appreciated for writing this script. I think this is really cool. I think a lot of us in IT live in the Slack world, so I think this is
Just a
pretty
quick
cool.
question there. Obviously, you can do output to standard things like email and things like that as well, yeah?
Yep. So ControlUp, yep. Let's take a quick look at that actually. So for instance, this is our guy here. Next. So what we can do is we can actually add, so you can send an email alert. You can actually add an email account to your organization. That could be your ServiceNow or whatever. And then we can actually pipe the output of the script to it as well. So if you're not using Slack, if you're using Jira or something like that, and they accept email ticket creation automatically, then we can use that. All right, so now let's get into something that's more serious within your environment. So if you can solve a problem before it becomes a problem, then obviously this is a good thing. And as we're adding more and more users onto shared hosted desktops, if you're in a Citrix environment, odds are you're using PVS, and you know what this means. As you're adding users, they're going to be writing more to the C drive. The C drive will spill over to your D drive, and then that disk is going to fill up. And if a PVS server, if that D drive fills up, you're going to have a bad day. You're going to probably experience a blue screen, and then all of a sudden all those users will get kicked. They're all going to relog on. They're all going to fill up your other servers, and you might even just get this crazy cascading failure. Bad news. But what we can do is we can actually detect Again, things like low disk space within ControlUp, and then we can actually execute a remediation action to solve this. So for instance, I'm going to look at, oh, not those guys. I want to look at my Citrix environment. I'm going to look at my MCS environment here. And I'm going to look at one of my machines. So I want to do this guy. So I'm going to choose F here. So he's, actually let's choose G. He's at 1.9 gigs free on his system drive. So obviously running out of space on the D drive, if you're on PBS, is bad. Running out of space on your system drive is bad for any server. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to fill it up. So we've got a script that we've got executing here that will just fill it up. So boom, we can see now we're down to 736 megabytes of free space. Now 136 megabytes of free space. ControlUp is going to detect that this number changed from a good state to a bad state. And now it's going to execute a cleanup action. And that you can see the CPU actually goes up here because we're running the Windows disk cleanup. So we're deleting temp files, all of that standard good stuff. And so boom, CPU goes back down, free space goes back up. We can see very quickly how this has just saved us from having a major incident. So, you know, if your users are printing reports, if those reports aren't getting deleted because the software that creates them, they decided, hey, it's best to just leave that stuff there, you can now monitor your free space, whether it's your system drive, whether it's, you know, your D drive, your E drive, or whatever drive you want, and then ControlUp can actually execute a remediation action there. So you can create a script that says, okay, I'm going to select the, you know, top any file older than a week or any file older than 2 weeks or something like that, and just delete them all. So let's look at how it does this. So if we go to triggers again, we've got our free space trigger right here. And so what we're looking at for this particular one, we're looking at a machine record, but there's a local disk one too if you wanted some more specific focus. And in this one, we're looking for the free space on the system drive is less than or equal to 600 megabytes. So once that's true, well, we do two actions. We're sending an email to Scott, and we're running an action, clean this Windows system drive. And so what does that look like? So if we go into script actions here, and let's look at our clean Windows system drive. So again, we're looking at, it's assigned to the machine, its execution context is target machine, and this is the script. So this was, I believe this one was written by, okay, it doesn't say. I think it was written by Ton though. So another great guy within the community who contributed the script to us. So this will actually go and actually execute the clean manager. So the clean MGR, you know, it can do things like, obviously it can purge out the Windows temp directory, which is, if you're a regular user, you don't have permission to do so, but since this is running as the system level permission, it's got permission to do almost anything. So it's able to clean out those directories, anything else that might be within the clean manager. So you're obviously, it's looking at your memory dumps, your mini dumps, anything to try to get your system up and running. Again, the array of different folders that it can clean, incredible. And then obviously just adding folders is trivial. Enter, comma, whatever, enter your folder path, etc. And again, the arguments that we're doing, so the way that some of these SPAs are written, they can take arguments if you want to run them manually. So in this particular case, you can actually choose to change these defaults. So this is telling us that, do you want to run Clean Manager with all options except Clean System Restore Point? So if you wanted to do that, you actually change this default from false to true, and then every time your automation executes, it's going to run with that preference. But if you execute this manually, you actually have an opportunity to change it. So for instance, if I choose to go through here and choose the clean Windows system drive, now I can actually change how I want to do this. This doesn't change it for everyone, this just changes it for you. If you want to change it for the automation, you have to do it in the script action itself. Okay, so again, the world we're living in, it's not an ideal world today. There wasn't so much of an opportunity to do capacity management so much as there is to just try to manage the capacity. And one of the ways we can do that is with ControlUp Insights. So this is our historical monitoring product. And if I click on it here, it's going to log me in and pass me through. And what our ControlUp Insights product does is all the metrics you see within the ControlUp console, they're getting uploaded to Insights, where we can do some analysis on them. And some of the things that we think could really help people today is, well, Top Insights today, it shows you how your environment was compared to yesterday. So you can kind of see if there's any organic growth. You can see if there's, things that you would expect to almost be a little bit abnormal. So we can see, like, 92% of our logons were faster than the Tuesday average. We have 3 computers with critical space. This is your heads-up display. We also do the environmental assessment, which actually does the processing when you click on it. And so what it does is it compares how your environment was today versus how it was on the previous weeks of that day. So what that means is you want to compare Wednesdays to Wednesdays, Thursdays to Thursdays, because a lot of people, what they have in their Citrix environments is they have what's the hump. They've got the Wednesday hump, where the number of users and the load of your environment actually goes up on Wednesdays. So it's moderately low on Monday, gets higher on Tuesday, higher on Wednesday, when it hits the peak, and then it starts dropping down on Thursday, and so on and so forth. So what the environmental assessment does is it actually produces that, how your day was versus previous days. So we'll just let that run of that same day of the week. And so this is one that I think is really important, that I think people need to take advantage of. I've talked to a couple customers that have used it today, and what it does is we can actually, ControlUp will actually measure how much CPU and how much memory is being consumed by both the virtual machine and the hypervisor level. And then there's some algorithms that are being played into here that actually does the calculation for us. But one of the differences between us and maybe some of our competitors is we show our work. So for instance, if I'm looking at CPU recommendations here, and I'm going to click on this guy, we can actually see ControlUp is recommending me to remove 3 vCPUs here and 6 gigs of RAM. And so when you ask the question, how is it coming to that conclusion, we can actually see it's giving you evidence based over the last month. And so for this particular guy, we can see his CPU utilization for the 95th percentile is 2%, and he averages 1% utilization. Now, that doesn't mean that maybe you should remove all those cores, but if you're looking at this, you can see that he never actually exceeds like 19-20%. He never exceeds 1 core's worth of CPU. So why are you giving him 3? Let's take away 3. And then the same for memory. If we're looking at memory, we can see that we've got 12 gigs of memory assigned. There's only 3 gigs that seem to be being used here. And again, ControlUp, it's giving us a buffer. Obviously, it doesn't want to have memory be maxed out. That would be very bad. So we inject, I think it's like a 20% buffer. So we're going from 12 gigs down to 6. And what this offers, if you're looking at like this one particular virtual machine, we can now spin up a whole other machine to start servicing more users. So obviously this will depend on the workload that you have, but if you've got 5 users, 10 users, 30 users on a virtual machine, and you can spin up another one, that's another 30 users that you can add to your environment. And then the same is true in reverse as well. So ControlUp will actually monitor and make a suggestion. I don't know that we have any in this particular state where it says that you should add memory or CPU because you're exceeding some threshold. So let's look at JSON. So we can see it's actually recommending we add memory because we're getting the 95th percentile, we're 87% memory utilization. So it also works in reverse. We can actually monitor and say, okay, your resource utilization is so close to being capped out that we think that there's probably a performance degradation here. So we're recommending you do the reverse now. You start adding resources to some virtual machines.
We're getting a couple of requests in the questions, Trent, about, can you show some NetScaler stuff? Have you got anything around size and recommendations? So I don't know whether you want to maybe delve into those in the console.
So the sizing recommendations, that's essentially what we're looking at here. We do have some new NetScaler reports. So you can actually click on this and look at some of the NetScaler stats that we're pulling. So obviously we're looking at, you can read it, there's the traffic in and out, the packet CPU, the memory utilization of your NetScalers, number of HDX sessions, and so on and so forth. We also show you the stats from any load balancers you might have and anything from your gateways as well. So we do pull the reports. ControlUp, it's totally free. It's a 21-day free trial with insights. So if you have it in your environment, you can download it, install it, start connecting in the resources to the console, and then once this populates, you can see what kind of reports we offer. We offer a very wide breadth of reports within the Insights
Have you
product.
got any Citrix licensing stuff as well? Just had a question in there as well about Citrix license usage and alerting when they run out and things like that.
Sure do, absolutely. So this is in our particular environment, we're always maxing out on our licenses, but this is kind of what you can see, and then obviously you can break it out by the individual products themselves. And I believe this is done by license server. So if you've got multiple license servers, if maybe you're an MSP or something, you can actually click on different ones to see the different license usage. And last thing I guess I want to touch on here is so session activity. Actually, one of the organizations, I get this request a lot, and it's an interesting request because I personally am not sure how I feel about it, but lots of organizations now that we're working remote, we want to know, are our users being productive? Are they actually doing work when they're working remotely? So for instance, I'm going to look at good old Joel here, and if I click on him, what ControlUp is going to do is actually going to produce a Gantt chart showing you whether the users are active, idle, whether they're in a disconnected state. Because being connected to a server doesn't necessarily mean that you're being productive. And so what we can look at here is we can see his Gantt charts. He looks pretty good. Looks like he was active from 3:45 to 5:21. He connected in, and then he was active the entire time. So at no point did Joel go into like a disconnected state or an idle state. So we can probably make the presumption here that he was working this entire time. So good on you, Joel. Obviously, we're showing the evidence of this Gantt chart underneath where we can actually see all the processes and objects and stuff that he launched and what he was doing. And then underneath that, we can actually even see the resource utilization and how he was actually consuming resources versus the machine itself. So this is a way that you can actually look at your users and see, if they're running a certain application, or do you have a user that's being particularly heavy on the server, you can actually see that ratio here. So while the computer itself was using 8%, 9%, 20% utilization, Joel was using 14. So we know that he was consuming the majority of the resources on that server. And then the same is true for memory utilization, IO utilization. We can look at, again, the protocol latency. So, user input delay is a great metric because it shows us how our servers are performing, but obviously we still need to know how the network's performing. And so we do offer the protocol latency as well. So this way we could see, 25 milliseconds, 28 milliseconds, the min, max, and average. So he looks like he had a great session while he was actually being productive. And then obviously protocol bandwidth is how much available bandwidth that he had while he was actually working. So he maybe started a stream or something here. And then last one, application load time. So we actually monitor certain applications. So you can actually see if they start increasing in their average app load time versus others. And so that's a feature within ControlUp that you can just check off.
I've got a request as well about the timeline search in Insights, showing whether you can go back 24 hours or by days or by weeks and things like that.
Yep, up here. Yeah, so we can go 4 hours, 24 hours, 1 week, 1 month, or you can actually specify a custom range as well. So I believe we have 5-minute granularity for all statistics up to 2 weeks, I think. Maybe don't quote me on that. And then if you go beyond that, I think it's 15 minutes. So that's ControlUp Insights, and we think that that's going to help you with your capacity management and actually monitoring user productivity and so on and so forth. I guess this gets us to the end of my presentation here. So kind of like what I was saying before, I know we're all stressed, we're all working hard, we all have little rugrats or maybe some other distractions. If you have a cat that I hear that are very good too to help distract you from actually trying to be as productive as possible. It's an interesting world we're living in today. You can download ControlUp for free from www.controlup.com. We're one of the few vendors where you don't have to set up a call, you don't have to do anything like that, you can just download the product and play. We've got some great setup guides online. We just had an article come out from another gentleman who just set it up in his home lab, so you can follow things like that. If you don't have the time to set aside 2 or 3 hours, or for an hour even, to set up a sales call where someone can go in and help set up your environment. If you need that help now, if you think you can, we believe the product is intuitive enough that you can download it, run it, add your hypervisor, start adding your machines, and start seeing value from it almost immediately. That we just give it away for free off the website, and the trial is 21 days, where it's unlimited with insights. If you ever needed anything longer, feel free to reach out to the ControlUp sales team, and they might be able to work something out where they can extend the trial for however long you might be needing. And then after that trial is exceeded, ControlUp still operates. The product is technically free, so it's free for up to 50 sessions. So you can still monitor some portions of your environment, and you can still execute some actions. I think the automation still works too. Again, don't quote me on that. I don't usually run with my trial exceeded, but you can still use ControlUp to help manage your environment. So thank you very much. And James, I just want to say, I'm a huge fan. I was watching your masterclass on your logon, how to optimize your logons, and I just thought it was amazing.
Well, thank you very much. I've been getting millions of questions while I've been doing this, and I apologise if I've missed anybody. Luckily, Joel was on the call, and he's actually been helping out. I've been firing some questions at him, so you don't have as many left, but you may have to go through a bit. But I'll just quickly call a couple out. God, what have we got? What have we got? We've got somebody was asking about obviously network metrics and connection speed and latency and things like that. I mean, I'm familiar with ControlUp. You can measure all of those things. It does help out in those situations. With remote workers identifying when people are having bad latency or slow connections and things like that.
Yep, absolutely. And we do monitor the RTT, so that's the real time round trip time of your protocol, of your actual sessions. And so we do offer that. So that actually tells you how, and we offer obviously available bandwidth as well. So you can see if users have good connectivity. So if they're streaming, if they got 10 megs of available bandwidth and they're streaming a video, they should have a good experience. If their RTT ends up being 100 milliseconds, you can start assuming that they're maybe not having as great of an experience because their frame rate is probably around 10 frames a second or so. But at least you can start doing those calculations, and it's all there in the real-time console.
Have you got another one that came up was, is there any compliance reporting in there to do kind of like high security environments? I'm not sure there was last time I used it.
It depends what they're looking for, I guess.
Right, you probably pick that one up in the when you get the questions list at the end, because there's a whole bunch of them there. There's another person asked, they were talking about the current and historical license usage, but is there any way you can use Insights to be proactive, to tell it that you're running low, to set up some kind of alerting around there? I can imagine, is that possible or not?
That's what the real-time console is for. So if you're looking for trending, we do offer professional services where we are coming up with custom solutions like that for our customers. So I would say it is possible, maybe not out of the box, but we do offer professional services that could solve that problem.
Excellent. What have I got? When's the latest version, the next version expected to release? Somebody has just asked down at the bottom there. It's just popped up on me.
So 8.15, beta of it was just released yesterday. So I think you can reach out to your account manager at ControlUp if you want it. Otherwise, it will be coming very shortly. It's in beta, so I would hope within. I don't want to give a timeline, but I'm hoping within 6 weeks or a month.
Cool. Right, I've missed a few out there. I've tried to answer as many as I can. But I know you guys get the questions afterwards, and you can pick them up. And Joel even offered me to put his email address in there, but I'm not going to do that. I'll let him share that somewhere. That's a bit sort of safer out there. But thank you very much, Joel, if you're listening, for helping me out there, because that's the most questions I've ever had in a webinar. You may not believe that. It's absolutely loads. So yeah, I'll let you guys pick up some other ones of those when you get free.
Awesome. Thank you so much, James. And thanks, Joel, if you're still on.
All right, then I'm going to pick things back up from here. And definitely, if we didn't get to your question, I am going to send the full question list, as James said, over to Trent afterwards, and we'll work on getting those answered for you. Some of them were answered in the chat, and I will probably put together a forum post at mycgc.org, and that way you'll be able to get to read through that. I'll put that link for you in the email that goes out tomorrow from GoToWebinar that accompanies the recording link. Just a couple of things before we wrap up. I want to let you know about a couple of virtual events we have coming up. So the UK is having their Spring XL event. This was originally planned to be an in-person event, but now it'll be online. James, I believe you have a presentation that day.
Oh, God, yes, I do. I might start writing it.
Yes, next Friday. So definitely check that out. All the details about that are over at mycgc.org under our events calendar. And also, we're hosting our first virtual town hall next week. This is not a technical webinar. It is purely to talk about all the challenges of working from home and all of the new coworkers that you might have, such as cats and dogs and children and spouses. So we have some veterans who've been working from home for ages, and then we have some people who are newer to it. And we're just going to talk about all of those things, and we're going to take questions from the audience and even let you guys share your insights. So if you have either of those, we'd love to have you. So definitely check those out. And finally, just want to remind you that if you did register to win a pair of Apple AirPods Pro, the winner will be selected at random offline, and we will announce that winner on Twitter. So stay tuned to us on Twitter, follow us at mycugc, and then just be sure to check us out on our website and keep up with what's going on with everything changing. We haven't been able to gather in person, but we're definitely doing what we can to have our local groups meet virtually and online. So the best place to get that information is on our events calendar and to follow us on Twitter. And with that, I am going to send you all off to enjoy the rest of your day. I hope you all stay healthy and well. And I just want to thank Trent and James. Thanks for being with us today, taking time out of your day. And thanks to all of you for being with us today as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, have a great rest of your day. Bye.